I'm probably the only writer, in fact I think I definitely am the only writer who got to write for both Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5. And it's very funny because when the shows first came out, people were thinking, well, how can you have two shows about space stations? Won't they be like the same show? And of course Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine are very, very different in tone, in story, in every area possible. And basically Babylon 5 was born out of Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. I brought Joe Straczynski into that show. I developed that show for a year. I guaranteed him as story editor. He then took over the story department of that show and did a great job and teamed with those producers and then went on to create Babylon 5 with them. And then, of course, when I heard, well, actually, I remember reading the pilot script of Babylon 5, I think 5 years before the show was even sold. And I read that script and I thought, oh, this is a great show. I was very eager for it to become a reality. I loved the vision of the show. I loved the variety of the show, the voice of the show. So the moment it got picked up, I let Joe Straczynski know that I wanted to write one. And he said, absolutely, you bet. So it was very funny because when we sat down, I'm probably one of the only people in the world who has the season 1 Bible of Babylon 5. He kept that very close to the chest. You know, he was talking about his 5-year arc and all of that stuff, and not letting even the actors know where their characters were going. And I remember even the Bible was very cagey. It said like one of the characters at the end of season 1 will undergo a change. Well, what change is that, Joe? Which character is that? No. So, but when we talked about Garibaldi and the idea of doing an episode where Garibaldi falls off the wagon because it had been established that he was an alcoholic, and I had the idea of him being framed because the question is, okay, what's going to make him vulnerable? What's going to throw him for a loop? And I thought, well, there'll be an act of sabotage on the ship. He gets framed for it. He loses his standing as a the head of security, and all of a sudden, everyone who has it against him, who has it in for him, he's no longer protected by his badge of authority. So I wrote the script, and it was one of the first season scripts, and it turned out that I was one of the few people who wrote for Babylon 5 other than Joe Straczynski. So I'm honored to be part of a team on Babylon 5 that includes the likes of Neil Gaiman and D.C. Fontana and David Gerald. And so then, but Babylon 5 also was very influential in terms of what I learned, not just from the writing of that show, but from the production of that show, because it was a very efficient model. They had standing sets. They had everything contained under one roof. They had their effects being generated in-house. Because I was able to study the production model of Deep Space Nine, which Doug Drexler was working on, who's now my partner on Space Command, and Babylon 5. I studied both of them closely. So with Space Command, which we're now doing, we're using what I learned from Deep Space Nine and from Babylon 5 in terms of production. So we have our standing sets, we have our visual effects team. We're able to do it for a very low budget because Babylon 5 came before us and was very effective and very efficient. And I remember sitting down with John Copeland, who was the producer, because at that time Deep Space Nine cost over $2 million an episode, and Babylon 5, their pattern budget the first season was something like $739,000 per episode. They never cracked $1 million. And so I sat down with John Copeland, who was the producer of Babylon 5, and I said, well, how are you able to pull this off? Because they had more effects, more stunts, more aliens, more everything than Deep Space Nine in terms of those arenas. And and I said, how are you able to do this? And he said, other people look at a script and say this can't be done. I look at a script and say, how can this be done? And the moment you do that, you change the paradigm. And so with Space Command, we're going to be doing this for an amazingly low budget, but thanks to the brilliance of Neil Johnson, the brilliance of Doug Drexler, my partners in this endeavor, we're going to be able to do special effects that just will blow you away on a budget that would have been unthinkable even 2 or 3 years ago. We're going to be able to have just amazing sequences, amazing everything in the science fiction universe. I think if you're a fan of Babylon 5, you're definitely going to love Space Command. So come over to spacecommandmovie.com and check out what we're doing, and I think you're going to be eager to be part of the journey with us. So thanks a lot.